Exposed: how one woman transformed a supply chain crisis into an incredible business revolution. Sarah Mitchell sat cross-legged on the cold tile floor of her family's grocery store, surrounded by half-empty shelves and the haunting silence of what was once a buzzing hub of the community. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a stark glow on product displays bearing the dull marks of neglect. She pressed her palms into her eyes, squeezing out exhaustion and the echoes of despair that loomed heavier than the air itself. The weight of her father's legacy rested on her shoulders, a burden she felt keenly now that the store teetered on the brink of collapse. Each day morphed into a staggering challenge. As the national supply chain crisis deepened, her family's grocery store, once a symbol of resilience, became a testament to decline. The streets outside, once vibrant, reflected the economic despair that gripped the town. She could almost hear the silence of the elderly neighbor next door, a farmer who had lost everything. A loss that rippled through the community deeper than the cracks forming in her own heart. Yet at night, after closing, Sarah found herself digging into spreadsheets, brainstorming new logistics strategies to avoid bankruptcy. To tackle her broken supply line, she felt something stir within, a dormant strength igniting like the flickers of the fluorescent lights above. A mission began to assemble in her mind. Instead of succumbing to the giants of corporate greed, she would rebuild a network of local farmers who could supply her store. She hesitated at the thought, contemplating if anyone would believe in her vision, even her. The steady rhythm of hope pushed against doubt, but her fears were relentless. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. But as she breathed life into her plans, a sense of unease nagged at her. The powerful industry players were already whispering threats. Rumors of sabotage surrounded her every move like a swarm of hornets, adding layers of anxiety to her already exhausted frame. Each time she renegotiated a contract, she wrestled with the dread of seeing it crumble under corporate claws. Would she have the capacity to confront them? The anxious racing of her mind mirrored the heartbeat of her two children, who deserved stability, safety. A mother who indeed drowned in the rising tides of uncertainty. As glimmers of community support emerged, Sarah fought hard against the inevitable swell of fear that threatened to engulf her. The stakes grew unbearable, and with each small success came another obstacle. Would she lose everything just as hope began to bloom? The anguish wrapped around her like a vice, constricting, tightening. But she couldn't give up, not now, not when her town's fragile heartbeat depended on her. She lived in the liminal space between hope and despair, and the clock ticked ominously. Soon, the struggle for survival transformed from an idea into a showdown, one where loyalty faced off against greed. And as she braced herself for the storm, she realized with sheer clarity that this was just the beginning. The climax loomed larger, relentless in its approach, nudging her into a confrontation she could neither escape from nor could she fully embrace. As dawn approached, the pale light of morning seeped through the grimy windows, illuminating the chaos that reigned in Sarah's mind. The flickering fluorescent lights felt like a mockery of her determination, reminding her that this fight was far from over. Determined to act, she spent the subsequent days reaching out to local farmers, crafting an engaging narrative that combined urgency with hope. Each phone call sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. Every conversation brought her closer to unearthing a patchwork of community spirit that had lain dormant beneath the surface of adversity. She discovered raw talent and deep-rooted commitment among these producers, realizing that they too yearned for a lifeline amid the turbulence. They wanted to supply more than just groceries. They wanted to reclaim a piece of their identities. But doubts still lingered. What if her ambition to forge this network fell apart, much like her past ventures? The very thought sent a wave of nausea through her. She had watched companies her father once revered succumb to the pressures of the industry. She couldn't bear the thought of repeating that haunting cycle. Yet this time, she wouldn't flinch. Sarah aimed to infuse her strategy with knowledge drawn from her father and seasoned entrepreneurs whom she'd quietly observed over the years. Her first meeting with the farmers was tentative. Standing in front of a small circle of sun-weathered faces, she forced herself to speak with conviction as she painted a picture of collaborative success. Their skeptical glances probed her authenticity. She felt small, even exposed. But the fire in her belly roared, guiding her words as she effortlessly articulated the shared dreams of sustainability and growth. Something in their eyes shifted, hope flickered like a candle in the wind. And that flicker grew as they exchanged their stories, fears, and ambitions, coalescing into a palpable sense of purpose. Yet, as days transitioned into weeks, the specter of her corporate adversaries loomed heavier. The whispers of sabotage grew into a menacing whisper as her competitors began to push back. Emails from supply chain disruptors arrived with threatening tones, warning her to back down. Her heart raced at the thought they would spare no effort to dismantle the budding alliance she was nurturing. She confronted her fears hour by hour, realizing that the only way to protect what she had built was to keep moving forward, unyielding to intimidation. As tension thickened, Sarah made a pact with herself. She would not be crushed under their weight. She transformed that fear into a meticulously crafted plan. Committed to a radical transparency, she organized a community outing to showcase the partnership she was forging. It wasn't simply about selling goods, it was about weaving back together the communal fabric her town had nearly lost amid corporate monopolies. One evening, after gathering her thoughts to finalize her presentation strategy, she stumbled upon a forgotten journal that her father had left behind, a repository of dreams and critical reflections. Leafing through the pages, she absorbed his insights and faced a shocking revelation. He, too, had once faced unprecedented trials. His resilience inspired her. She wasn't just mimicking his legacy, she was creating one of her own. But as she put the finishing touches on her event plans, an icy stab of doubt wormed its way back into her heart. Was she ready for the backlash her bold move would invoke? The moment of truth was fast approaching. Uncertainty gripped her, and as she stood on the edge of this new venture, she realized that the fight against corporate greed was only just beginning. Would her courage be enough to confront the real threats looming on the horizon? She knew that the time had come to face her fears head-on, starting a battle she could neither ignore nor retreat from. The day of the presentation arrived, and Sarah stood before a painted backdrop of vibrant greens and earth tones, mirroring the fresh produce she aimed to promote. Behind her, an assembly of local farmers, nervously clutching their products, and community members, uncertain yet curious, filled the makeshift venue. The atmosphere fizzed with anticipation, a palpable energy that pulsed against Sarah's skin. Yet beneath that excitement, a steadiness of fear began to coalesce. She took a deep breath, her chest rising as she steadied her thoughts. In that moment, she transformed her internal chatter into a calculated silence. Her eyes scanned the faces of the crowd, hoping for a supportive gleam. She remembered her father's determination and the strength he drew from adversity. They all deserved to hear the story of resilience, her story, interwoven with theirs. As she began, her voice resonated with clarity. We are at a crossroads, and today's choices will shape not just our supplies, but our community's future. She spoke about the oppressive grip of corporate monopolies and how their disdain for local craftsmanship threatened the soul of their shared identity. With each word, she illustrated a vision where farmers and communities stood shoulder to shoulder, forging an alliance that would not yield to external pressures. Yet, even as she conveyed enthusiasm, she was aware of the undercurrent of doubt swelling in the audience. Was she preaching optimism while their reality remained grim? She watched as a farmer in the front row shifted uncomfortably, his skepticism glaring. A voice from the crowd, fraught with hesitation, broke the silence. What if this doesn't work? We've tried before. The words hit like a slap. Sarah's heart quickened, the silence thickening with tension. Could she quell the storm brewing in that voice? She inhaled deeply, recalling the resolute embers kindling within her. This was her moment to engage, not just to plead. "I understand the weight of your concern," she replied, her voice steady, "but every revolution begins with daring to dream and risks. And this is not just my fight, it's ours. Together, we possess strengths that cannot be dismantled." As she continued, a shift began to occur. The tension morphed into curiosity. She detailed a plan that involved shared marketing efforts and community workshops, suggested avenues for growing their reach collectively, built on the unique stories each farmer had to tell. The crowd shifted from skepticism to contemplation, and near the end, she witnessed the initial flickers of hope rekindling in their expressions. Even as she spoke, the shadows of her corporate rivals loomed larger. Day after day, they seemed to respond with intimidation tactics, harsher threats, aggressive marketing ploys. They clung to the old ways, waiting to see her falter. Sarah felt the pressure building. Every delay in support from the farmers pushed their situation closer to desperation, but pushing harder would leave her vulnerable. Too, she resolved to confront this in a new way. Instead of caving from fear, she would embrace it as a catalyst for innovation. That night, she sat alone at her kitchen table, echoing thoughts of betrayal and self-doubt swirling like the remnants of old dreams. Was she equipped to morph this venture into something formidable? Determined to gain an upper hand, she strategized a stronger engagement with influential community members who supported local production. Leveraging their voices would elevate her cause, but how far would they be willing to go against the corporate machinery? Each decision weighed heavy, testing her foundational beliefs about collaboration versus competition. She finally rested her eyes that night. An idea sparked in her mind, an unorthodox approach that would turn the tides. But as dawn broke, illuminating her vision, she instinctively grasped the weight of that newfound ambition. The battle was far from over, and unresolved questions scratched at her consciousness. Were her allies prepared for what should unfold next? Would their fear give way to the audacity she so desperately sought to inspire? The fight was intensifying, and Sarah could no longer evade it. The time had come to skate the surface of cooperation, to challenge her allies and take a definitive stand against her opponents. Would she embrace this bolder path, or would fear choke her resolve once more? The sun hung heavy in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into Sarah's thoughts. Yes, she had ignited a spark in the crowd, but now she felt the weight of accountability pressing against her ribs. Ideas flowed through her mind like a torrent. The unorthodox initiative she envisioned demanded immediate execution. Each moment lost to hesitation ratcheted up the stakes. Seated at her worn kitchen table amid scattered notes and half-empty coffee cups, Sarah felt the walls closing in, reality encroaching on her daydreams. Ideas, once vibrant and alive, turned convoluted when faced with the rawness of potential failure. She closed her eyes, envisioning the faces of the farmers who had looked toward her with a flicker of hope. Listen to them, she thought. Their stories were weapons, their experiences the battles to arm her vision. She turned her mental focus inward, exposing her own hidden fears. What if her notions weren't as foolproof as she envisioned? What if they didn't resonate, leading to nothing but disappointment? No, she couldn't allow the specter of doubt to turn her plans into vapor. If she was going to make a real impact, the first step lay in a powerful outreach campaign that would not only raise awareness but also garner alliances. She knew she needed to move beyond just farmers. She needed consumers, local businesses, and the media to amplify her message. Fueled by caffeine and urgency, Sarah reached for her laptop and began drafting an ambitious press release that could entice local influencers to rally behind her cause. She carefully crafted each sentence, threading her vision of collaboration into eloquent passages that highlighted the community's resilience. This was not just a tale of survival. It was a clarion call to those who valued authenticity, a chance to reclaim lost narratives. As she typed, flashes of doubt surfaced. Was her storytelling robust enough? Would her passion be mirrored in the community's response? Each keystroke was a confrontation with her insecurities, yet each doubt transformed into fuel. Later that afternoon, She made a list of potential allies: local chefs known for sourcing ingredients from nearby farms, influential food bloggers who celebrated regional cuisines, even local business owners who thrived on a shared ethos. Every name ignited a flicker of excitement within her as she considered the strength in numbers. Now the question loomed: how to approach them? Would they be as risk-averse as the farmers had been? To initiate conversations would require confidence, even as she herself wrestled with uncertainty. But perhaps embracing that uncertainty alongside her potential allies would inspire a sense of solidarity. A phone call to her first contact brought heart-pounding exhilaration and nearly paralyzing apprehension. She dialed the number of Max, a local chef known for his fervent support of farm-to-table dining. His unwavering consumer loyalty was grounded in his own values, making him an essential player in her vision. The phone rang, heralding a decision that might tumble her into a new dimension of influence. When Max answered, Sarah's mind raced, words colliding in a chaotic whirlwind. Yet, she could feel herself taking charge, her voice steadying as she explained her mission. Max, I believe that together we can create something transformative, not just for us, but for the entire community. A pause. Did she dare hope for the spark of enthusiasm in response? I'm listening, he said finally, curiosity lacing his tone. Words tumbled out as she shared her vision with unfiltered passion, the air between them shifting with collective possibility. The conversation flowed, transforming her trepidation into renewed vigor. As she hung up, invigorated from the call, Sarah's phone buzzed with notifications, alerts from the local media responding to her press release, signaling burgeoning interest already. The time for hesitation had dissolved. The first steps toward collaboration were solidifying. Yet still, the shadow of her adversaries crept into her awareness. They would retaliate. Complacency was a luxury she could not afford. Faced with the immediate pressure of potential backlash and the strength of mounting alliances, Sarah felt an indignant fire flicker beneath what once seemed insurmountable challenges. This was becoming a full-fledged battle, and she was ready to wage it. But lurking in the recesses of her mind remained the question: was she fully prepared for what lay ahead, or was she merely courting disaster against a grinding machine of compliance? The stakes had never been higher, and soon she would have to confront those formidable forces front and center. Would she emerge victorious in a fight that threatened not just her vision, but so much more? The adrenaline from her conversation with Max faded, replaced by a creeping awareness of complexity. Sarah sat in her cluttered kitchen, now an impenetrable fortress of ambition and trepidation. The encouraging words from Max echoed in her ears, yet doubt crept in, clawing at her resolve. She had begun to build a web of support, but now she had to confront the myriad decisions that could either solidify her influence or dismantle her fragile progress. The room felt stifling as she analyzed her next moves. There had been a brief moment of exhilaration, but now the weight of potential fallout sat heavy on her shoulders. Business owners and influencers could easily pivot their loyalty. She needed to nurture their interest while fending off opposing forces. Success depended not only on collaboration but also on strategy, the kind that required foresight in handling the inevitable resistance. Caffeine fueling her determination, she reached for her notebook, jotting down strategies. Focus, she thought. Identify the strongest arguments against those who oppose you. Her hand moved swiftly over the page as she constructed a profile for those forces. Competitors resistant to change, economic elites clinging to outdated methods, and the skeptics whose voices echoed in the marketplace. They brewed their strength from tradition, and tradition was her nemesis. In those quiet moments of analysis, new fear surfaced. What if her plans threatened a deeply entrenched system? What if her vision only opened her eyes to the futility of her ambition? The specter of failure transformed into a tangible monster lurking in the corners of her mind. Yet, this time, instead of surrendering to that fear, she took a deliberate breath and quelled its uprising with action. Next, she focused on her message. Drawing on the narratives of the farmers who inspired her, she needed to weave their struggles into a compelling discourse. Building alliances hinged on more than business. It required storytelling that could harness emotional resonance. Community strength lay in shared experience, and so she decided to leverage local narratives to bridge her vision with her allies. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, crafting a series of posts and articles that showcased the farmers' resilience. High-quality images of produce, paired with heartfelt testimonials, would create a tapestry of authenticity. This, she mused, could be the heart of the campaign. Pictures of sun-kissed vegetables, labor-worn hands, and vibrant farm landscapes could evoke a visceral response from consumers and influencers alike, but she needed to be bolder. A press release alone wouldn't suffice. A proactive strategy was vital. She needed to galvanize action, encourage dialogues with consumers, and form direct connections. Could she host an open forum where voices otherwise stifled could resonate freely? Initially daunting, the thought began to transform her anxiety into a realization. The community's stories might be her strongest weapon. As she formulated her plans, external chaos suddenly interrupted her thoughts. A group of disgruntled farmers on social media began to voice their discontent about the local agricultural system. They condemned the status quo in vicious terms, and Sarah sensed their frustration was justified. What if these farmers were a reflection of the fears she herself grappled with? Their anger pointed towards a system that was resistant to evolution. Sarah leaned back, heart racing at the thought of directly engaging these angry farmers. Perhaps this was not just a calamity to manage. It could be an opportunity. What if they saw her as a potential ally rather than a threat? She felt the palpable weight of destiny settle upon her. Would she be courageous enough to confront them head-on? What if I host a meeting? She pondered, excitement mingling with fear. Could I draw them in? The prospect thrilled her. This could be the moment that solidified her emergence from an uncertain dreamer to a decisive leader. Yet, was she truly prepared to navigate the storm of emotions that awaited her? The shadows of uncertainty clawed at her resolve, but that inner fire forced her forward. The time for passive waiting had passed. It was time for action, and the heat of her uncertainty transformed into a fierce resolve. She would stand in front of the frustrated farmers, not as a harbinger of a new order, but as a vessel of their anger and hopes, intertwining her vision with theirs. Let them see me, Sarah thought, feeling the stirring of purpose rise in her chest. This was no longer about merely fostering alliances. It was about mutual empowerment through transformation. But as the weight of this responsibility settled upon her, one thing became clear. The confrontation loomed before her like a storm gathering strength, and she would have to face it ready or not. Would she courageously step into the fray or retreat into the shadows of her uncertainty? The decision lay ahead, and Sarah could almost taste the significance of that moment, a moment that could define not just her journey, but the futures of those who had placed hopes in her vision. The challenge was undeniable, but the stakes had never felt higher. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Sarah's kitchen as she meticulously prepared for the upcoming meeting. The cluttered space, once a source of stress, now resonated with anticipation. This was it. The moment where she had to transform her vision into reality, where her ability to rally the disgruntled farmers could either lift her dreams or shatter them completely. She set out to gather her thoughts, her pulse quickening at the thought of standing before those whose disappointment was palpable. What would they think of her? Would they see a leader or merely a catalyst of change which they might well resist? Sitting at her small, worn table, she allowed the waves of anxiety to wash over her, then took a deep breath. Instead of fleeing, she decided to write down her fears, confronting them head-on. The doubts tumbled out onto the page. What if they don't trust me? What if I can't communicate my vision effectively? What if they call me out as a pretender? It was cathartic and sobering. Each fear documented became a point of preparation rather than a limit, transforming her internal narrative from one of impending doom to a grounding reality check. Every leader faces doubt, she recited softly to herself. Preparedness is my antidote. She flipped the page, ready to script her narrative for the meeting. With the stories of the farmers resonating in her heart, she sought a blend of empathy and inspiration. To foster trust, her approach had to be earnest. She couldn't simply promise change, she had to embody it. They needed to see her dedication, a willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder with them, to expose her vulnerabilities and to share the daunting challenges she faced as well. This transparency could disarm their skepticism, igniting solidarity instead of suspicion. As the night wore on, her notes took shape, reflecting her readiness. She crafted an agenda that wouldn't just present her ideas, but would invite collaboration. The format she envisioned allowed the farmers to voice their concerns openly, an approach that stood in stark contrast to the dismissiveness they had previously encountered. Change is a dialogue, not a monologue, she reminded herself as she compiled her thoughts. She would engage them in discussions, posing questions that would lead to constructive debates rather than defensive rhetoric. The goal was to forge connections, to bind their experiences with her vision, creating a shared narrative that would unify instead of divide. The looming uncertainty transformed into clarity and drive. As Sarah prepared to step into the room, the gravity of her intentions anchored her resolve. This was not simply about business. It was a movement towards transformation, an evolution that could breathe new life into their collective futures. But would they embrace this bold proposal? Or would she become just another voice drowned out by the chorus of discontent? Would they perceive her as genuine or merely another opportunist? The questions loomed over her as she collected her materials, anxiety fluttering in her stomach. Yet tinged with that unease was an invigorating rush of purpose. She knew that this meeting would be the crucible in which her vision could either crystallize or collapse. As the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the first farmers, her heart raced. The moment had arrived. She took one last breath, grounding herself. This was her time. The potential of shared stories awaited on the other side of that threshold. But would those stories be enough to cultivate the trust she so desperately needed? With a determined stride, she made her way to the door, ready to face the uncertain tide of emotions and expectations waiting on the other side. Would the confrontation strengthen her connection to these farmers, or would she find herself isolated in their discontent? The stakes remained incredibly high, and Sarah was about to plunge headfirst into a volatile negotiation. With the door swinging open, Sarah was immediately met with a wave of apprehension. The farmers stood on her doorstep, expressions etched with doubt and fatigue. She invited them in, attempting to mask her own uncertainty behind a welcoming smile. As they shuffled into her kitchen, the weight of their combined skepticism settled like an oppressive cloud. This was not just a meeting, it was a moment steeped in potential and danger. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "I know things have been tough, and I appreciate your willingness to discuss how we can change what isn't working." It was a feeble start, but it was a start nonetheless. She sensed their eyes probing, measuring her assurance against their discontent. As the group settled around the table, Sarah focused on her notepad, seeking comfort in her prepared agenda. But the words she'd meticulously crafted now felt fragile. She gripped the sides of her chair, aware that every minute spent shuffling papers represented another moment of dwindling faith from these farmers. "Haven't we tried everything?" one farmer asked, his voice laced with skepticism. He leaned back, arms crossed defensively, a physical testament to his distrust. "What makes you think you can do any better?" An invitation disguised as challenge. Sarah channeled her initial anxiety into clarity. "I understand your frustration, but I believe that together, we can create an approach that puts your needs at the forefront." The murmurs of discontent surged in response, and her earlier confidence faltered. Sarah quickly flipped through her notes, scanning for the persuasive statistics and successes she had hoped would resonate. "We've had some successes in the community with new crop distributions, and I believe we can replicate that here. No offense, but a few good stories won't fix our problems," another farmer retorted, pulling her focus again. Sarah felt the hit like a physical blow. The stark reality of their conditions felt almost unbearable. But she knew she had to steer the conversation back. "You're right. Stories alone won't solve anything, but they help illustrate our potential." She paused, gathering her courage. "What I want to do is build a new system. something that embodies not just financial success, but also understands your struggles. The silence that followed was deafening. Had she overstepped? Had she failed to convey her sincerity? The farmers exchanged glances, weighing her words against their lived experiences. The tension in the room thickened like the humidity before a storm. Maybe we should focus on just one issue, another farmer suggested, softer this time, but also laced with disbelief. What do you think you can accomplish in just one round of discussions? Sarah felt her pulse quicken again, but this was the challenge she'd been waiting for. Let's take it one step at a time, she replied slowly, her resolve stiffening. Let us discuss the things that most impact your daily work. If we can address one issue together, imagine what else we could tackle later. As she spoke, Sarah caught the flickering glimmers of curiosity emerge within the farmer's expressions, a tiny shift from skepticism to engagement. Here was the opening she needed, the opportunity to show them how change could begin from the ground up. The conversation shifted as they shared their ideas and frustrations. Old wounds surfaced, but so did a collective resilience. The more they spoke, the more she realized the truth. These farmers possessed immense knowledge and skills, untapped resources that were crucial to her vision of change. This wasn't just about her guiding them, it was about weaving their input into the framework of the solution. As they continued discussing, Sarah's thoughts raced ahead, mapping pathways of collaboration, brainstorming together toward a shared future. But as the meeting wore on and plans began to take shape, a quiet dread settled within her. Would their initial curiosity evolve into commitment? Would they buy into her vision? Or was this merely another fleeting moment of hope, destined to fizzle out? In the throes of newfound momentum, she couldn't shake off the gnawing doubt that echoed her earlier fears. Could she hold this fragile trust and ensure it blossomed? As the farmers began to leave, her thoughts teetered on the edge of exhilaration and anxiety. One thing was clear: this had only been the beginning of a much larger conversation. The stakes were higher now. Would the trust she tried to build withstand the coming trials, or would she find herself back at square one? With determination coursing through her veins, Sarah watched them walk away, her heart thumping in rhythm with the unresolved questions lingering in the air. This was only the first step into uncharted territory. Yet she couldn't help but wonder what might emerge if she could truly embrace the unpredictability of this journey ahead. The following morning, a restless energy buzzed within Sarah as sunlight filtered through her kitchen window, illuminating the scattered papers on her counter. She spent the early hours reviewing the notes from last night's meeting, not just focusing on the plans, but reflecting on her approach. Each farmer's doubt had burned into her memory, intensifying her sense of responsibility. Could she truly be the catalyst for change, or was she merely standing at the precipice of a daunting task? As she moved through the motions of preparing breakfast, her thoughts oscillated between excitement and trepidation. Rather than surrendering to self-doubt, Sarah made a conscious decision to lean into the uncomfortable feeling that had settled in her stomach. The clarity of her mission began to crystallize. She was here to interpret their struggles and transform them into actionable solutions. After breakfast, she gathered her materials and set off toward the main farming district, a plan slowly solidifying in her mind. She needed clarity on their immediate concerns, a way to delve deeper into the issues beyond surface-level dissatisfaction. It was time to take her presence from mere facilitator to an active advocate. Arriving at the first farm, she spotted Tom, one of the older farmers, checking his irrigation system. With a hurried greeting, Sarah stepped forward, approaching him with both enthusiasm and purpose. "Tom, mind if I join you? I want to understand your process better." Surprised yet intrigued, he put down his tools. "You really think you can help us?" The lingering doubt in his voice ignited her determination. She nodded fervently. "Yes, I believe I can. But I need your insights to navigate this." As they toured the fields together, she observed every detail: the cracked soil, hesitant crops, and the weary expression on his face. Tom laid out the intricacies of his struggles: outdated resources, inconsistent supply chains, and the escalating costs that felt insurmountable. With each revelation, The knot of her impending responsibility began to untangle, revealing insights into where to direct her focus. I know we've been talking about shifts on a large scale, but maybe if we start making small changes here, it could snowball, she suggested, feeling the tension between her aspirations and the farmer's reality. It was an audacious thought, potentially laden with naivete, but the words resonated with Tom. Curiosity danced in his eyes as he considered her proposition. After hours of discussions with Tom, and then several others throughout the day, Sarah realized there was a common thread weaving through each farmer's concerns, a genuine need for sustainable practices that didn't compromise their livelihoods. Every challenge faced was rooted not only in outdated methods, but also in an emotional landscape of hope bled dry by years of struggle. Each conversation chipped away at her initial panic, replacing it with a growing realization of her role as an intermediary, a translator between their needs and practical solutions. Back at home, she organized her notes, sketching out ideas for sustainable solutions, but the scope of the task began to feel daunting again. What if her ideas fell flat? What if her enthusiasm led them down another dead end? That night, as she sat in her living room with a fresh pot of coffee and her thoughts swirling, the uncertainty clawed at her confidence. But then a flicker of determination ignited within her. This was about digging deep and unearthing collective strength from vulnerability. Just as she began to outline her next steps, a notification on her phone interrupted her thoughts. A message from a local journalist seeking to know more about the farmer's struggles and her involvement popped onto the screen. Suddenly, a new thread unfurled before her publicity could amplify their voices. But was she ready to share their journey, to expose the very challenges she was still coming to terms with? With her heart pounding, Sarah contemplated the path ahead. Would she rally behind this new opportunity and risk the rawness of the conversations, or would she protect the farmer's narratives, preserving them until she felt more equipped? The urgency of the decision loomed. The moment of truth was drawing closer. Could she embrace this challenge and keep pushing forward, even as uncertainty enveloped her? The next morning, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open but her mind far away. The journalist's message loomed over her like an impending storm, its contents both a potential lifeline and a breathtaking risk. She could shine a spotlight on the farmers' struggles, realigning public understanding of their plight, but such exposure also threatened the intimate trust she had built in her conversations. Would she betray their confidence by inviting scrutiny? With the sunlight streaming through the window, she let her fingers hover over the keyboard, wrestling with the gravity of her choice. What would it mean for her? What would it mean for the farmers? Was she ready to become their spokesperson, someone publicly accountable for narrating their vulnerabilities? After a long pause, she typed a response to the journalist, agreeing to an interview but insisting that the farmers' experiences must remain central to the story. She wouldn't speak for them, but instead amplify their voices. A flicker of relief washed over her. The decision felt like a commitment to honor their struggles, and with that acknowledgement, a new sense of purpose began to unfurl within her. With her mind partially at ease, she turned her attention back to her notes from the past week's farm visits. Each farmer's story had ignited passionate thoughts about innovative practices, and she needed to start mapping out actionable steps. Instead of freezing at the enormity of the task ahead, she found a spark of motivation growing inside her, compelling her to sort through the chaos of ideas. She realized she had absorbed insights from diverse sources, and now it was time to prioritize. A baseline assessment of issues emerged: water conservation, crop rotation, and localized support systems. Drawing these concepts together felt invigorating. This was more than just a list of challenges, it signaled the potential for transformative change. As ideas underpinned by research and observations began to flow, she allowed herself to envision a sustainable strategy that truly resonated with each farmer's need. As the hours passed, Sarah found a rhythm in creating a plan, writing down specific techniques that aligned with farmer feedback. The detailed proposals took on contours, outlining how they could participate in pilot projects. By engaging the farmers in brainstorming sessions, she wouldn't just impose her ideas, she'd integrate their lived experiences into concrete actions. Yet, Her reading of the room had to also include the delicate nuances of farmers' histories, their ingrained mistrust stemming from years of broken promises. Sarah was determined to foster collaboration rather than dictate solutions. Failure to do so could derail her credibility and demoralize those who needed hope more than anything else. That afternoon, as she prepped for her first meeting with the journalist, an uneasy thought struck her. Were her growing ideas truly viable, or were they just a reflection of her urgency to make an impact? Doubts wove through her, whispering about the risks of overpromising. Each proposal represented a fragile thread connecting the farmers and their perceptible mistrust to her own ambition. Shuffling the papers in front of her, a sudden realization hit. The success of her plan relied not solely on her knowledge, but on establishing genuine rapport with each farmer. She needed to articulate a vision that threaded their voices together, assessing their unique contexts and perspectives. As she prepared for the interview, she practiced conveying the essence of her work, a clear articulation of their needs and struggles. Through this approach, the farmers could finally become empowered storytellers rather than just subjects of her narrative. They would be the ones pushing for change, her determination solidifying. Sarah took a deep breath. The time had come to face the uncomfortable yet exhilarating challenge of articulating their combined aspirations. In that moment, she felt aligned with her mission, but just as the thought of empowerment settled within her, a text message popped up on her screen. It was Tom, hinting at a potential protest forming among a few farmers who felt her outreach might disrupt their operations rather than support them. This was not only a challenge to her integrity, but also a test of her nascent leadership. Would she be a beacon of hope for the farmers, rallying them towards a shared objective, or would she falter in the face of unrest? The line had been drawn, and the stakes were higher than ever. What choice would she make to navigate this conflict? Would she persevere or retreat into insecurity, endangering the very mission she had committed herself to? The day of the interview finally arrived, and Sarah stood before the journalist with a sense of purpose coursing through her veins. It wasn't just about sharing stories. It was about embodying the trust she had painstakingly built among the farmers. She would serve as their voice, amplifying the very narratives of resilience they had shared with her. As the journalist's camera clicked, she felt her nerves settle into a sense of confidence. This is a moment for all of us, she reminded herself. Each question posed was met with articulate responses grounded in authenticity. Sarah spoke not only of her vision but the farmers' real struggles, the struggle for sustainability, for dignity, and for a fighting chance against the tide of corporate control. She detailed the actionable changes she envisioned, straight from their conversations, emphasizing that every grain of insight came from their lived experiences. After the interview wrapped, Sarah walked away with a renewed sense of clarity. She had conquered the fear that had once tied her tongue. Her confidence had blossomed in the light of accountability. Each step she took felt like a commitment, a promise to not only be a leader but an advocate for those who could not voice their fears and aspirations. In the days following the article's publication, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages of support from other farmers, local businesses keen to collaborate, and consumers eager to understand the movement. Sarah had ignited a community-wide conversation, and every reaction fueled her momentum. A local chef expressed interest in hosting a dinner featuring the farmers' produce, which could highlight the benefits of sustainable farming to the larger community. With each new alliance formed, Sarah realized she had transcended her original vision. This would be more than just a grocery store's resurgence. It would represent a movement rooted in empowerment. Her initial feelings of doubt melted away as she demonstrated her capacity to forge partnerships and drive change. She had honed her ability to be agile, adjusting her strategies based on feedback and fostering trust through transparency. However, not all was smooth sailing. Within a week of the article's release, she received a disturbing call from Tom. "There are protests planned," he said, frustration tinged with concern. "Some farmers believe your outreach will only disrupt our current operations." Hearing this chilled Sarah to her core. Could her well-intended mission backfire? Yet, rather than shrink away, she found strength in adversity. She organized an emergency meeting to address these concerns openly, recognizing that confrontation could lead to cohesion. The day of the gathering, as she approached the nervous farmers, she felt the weight of expectation fill the air. "I'm here to listen," she stated, her voice unwavering.
"This is not about me.
"This is about all of us, and your voices are crucial." As Tom and others voiced their apprehensions, she leaned in, embodying a presence of unity rather than division. They discussed the roots of their worries, delving into the nuances of agricultural systems and the fear of change. Rather than dismissing their concerns, Sarah encouraged debate and exploration of potential solutions. The workshop turned into a powerful exchange, illuminating the needs and fears that had previously sat unaddressed. Through active engagement, the shift was palpable. The skepticism that once loomed began to dissipate, and Sarah watched as they formed constructive avenues for collaboration. Ideas emerged, and tangible actions took shape, solidifying the groundwork for a cooperative where everyone's contribution was recognized and valued. In that moment, standing in the swirling discussions and passionate exchanges, Sarah felt a full-circle transformation. She was not just a dreamer anymore. She was a catalyst for shared empowerment, emerging into a solid, confident leader who could unify diverse voices into a coherent movement. By the end of those discussions, plans were set in motion to host a community event that would showcase local produce, invite open dialogues with consumers, and create a permanent platform for continuous collaboration. Sarah felt a sense of triumph wash over her. She had not only addressed opposition but harnessed it into opportunity. As she reflected on her journey, she knew she had proven that unwavering commitment to others could spark profound transformation. She had established herself as a recognized leader, her competence affirmed, and her impact irrevocably felt within her community. The closing chapter of this tumultuous yet rewarding saga meant Sarah had conquered not just her fears, but had cultivated a legacy of empowerment within her town, a legacy that would thrive well beyond her family's grocery store. Now is the time to support us. You need to subscribe now to ensure you never miss out on the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach others who could gain from these tales. Comment your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. We want to hear from you. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this inspiring journey of transformation.